Hello and welcome to the Outcast. I'm your host HC. With me are.
Wolf.
Haddock.
Jaya?
And today we're here to talk about a show that I might have mentioned before when we summed up 2021. I said it was probably my favorite show of last year. I still
Mhm.
stand by it. Today we're talking about Inside Job, a kind of new Netflix cartoon which debuted in October, I think. Was it October?
Yes.
Yeah, it was October. And I basically got to watch it because I heard our two guests talk about it. So I decided I'll give it a shot. And now I told Wolf, hey, listen, we're talking about this. So he watched it. And now we're going to talk about it. So without giving many, we are still not talking spoilers at this point. So, Haddock, let's start with you. What do you think about Inside Job?
Oh goodness. It is probably going to be one of my favorite shows from 2021 as well. I haven't thought up a whole list or something or even remembered exactly what came out when. But it has to be near the top and certainly one that I was looking forward to for a long time before it got released because I follow a lot of people like Alex Hirsch and the people who came out of the Gravity Falls team. Um
Mhm.
I couldn't be more pleased with what season one has given us. I think it's a wonderful blend of comedy and well, the dark humor comedy and also just absurdity and having fun with it rather than being too cynical. So,
Yeah.
yes, in short, love it.
Mhm. Jaya, what about you?
I have to say, because Gravity Falls, I saw that when I was in my 20s, and it was around the same time that I actually met Haddock, though ironically we were in a different fandom then, and I thought Haddock was senpai because Haddock was posting these very deep posts on books. And then
Mhm.
I got into Gravity Falls, which is Alex Hirsch's previous show about two twins that spend the summer with their kooky uncle in a strange town. And then Inside Job came out because Alex was mentioning he would be working on this project, but I hadn't heard much about it. And I thought, do I really want to watch an adult cartoon on Netflix that is likely to be grim and depressing? And then I saw the trailer on Netflix, which showed a woman scientist trying to keep her alcoholic dad from getting shot and bringing him into a covert facility, telling him we gotta set ground rules. And I'm like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna see it because I just realized this is actually gonna be hilarious. And so I told my brother, who was away at the time, we're watching this, and we got into it, and we actually found it hilarious. Because Inside Job easily could have been like BoJack Horseman, and BoJack Horseman is amazing, but it's not something you should see if you're in the wrong state of mind because it can get very existential. But Inside Job, even though it has sad moments, it is really funny and leans into the concept that all conspiracy theories are true. And our main character is a 30-year-old woman who wants to run all of them, but she's hampered by double
Side note,
standards
I
in the
think she's
workplace.
40.
She is
Isn't she
30.
40?
She's
30.
30.
It's mentioned that
Oh,
she's 30.
I was sure I heard 30, but this is why
Yeah,
you have
she's my
subtitles on,
age,
people.
HC. God.
Having just rewatched the episodes, I know how you can get 40. Once we start talking spoilers, I can point out
Yeah,
numbers.
okay. So, anyway, yeah, that age group. And yeah, Wolf, she's old like you.
Yeah, but you're trying to make her older, like all young people, trying to make us old people feel older than what we actually are. God.
Mhm. You
Yeah,
see, it's a conspiracy.
it
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Age is
is.
a conspiracy. Is that what we're settling on?
Age
Yeah.
is a conspiracy.
That's what I'm going to take because I am a young person.
Don't
Sup,
make me feel
fellow
old. I
kids?
turned 30 last year.
Yeah. So, Jaya, basically, you're saying you like the show.
I love
Sorry for
this
cutting you.
show a lot, and Jay and I have been talking about my brother. Is like, when is season 2 coming out? And we're like, but in theory, 20 episodes were ordered for this. We only saw
Yeah.
10. So in theory, it should be soon.
Mm.
And so it's
Actually, special note on that, it's not known as season one, but as part one.
right.
So that's probably implies that there's more to come. We just need to wait for announcement. And knowing Netflix, it can be happen tomorrow at the time of this recording, for all we know.
That's true.
Guess we'll see.
On that note, Cuphead's coming out in February 18th, based on the video game. I advise everyone watch it if you love vintage cartoons, or if you are suffering Wander Over Yonder withdrawal, because
let's skip that for Cuphead because that's a whole other topic. So, Wolf, since you're the newbie, I'm curious, what did you think of the show?
I enjoyed it. I had fun. I will say it didn't really fully grasp me until I want to say the final third. The final, 3 or so episodes is when it really hooked me in, personally. Until then, it was very much, I'm enjoying this, kind of going along with it, having fun, laughing at a lot of the jokes, but it never really hooked me in until that final bit, I will
Could
say.
I say the episode where I think the hook is?
Sure.
I think it's episode 6, My Big Flat Earth Wedding. I think that's the point at which you're either going to be in or out. Because it's not exactly like the plot heavy episodes yet where you really get pulled into like the plot stuff, but it's the point at which they're finally pulling out all the stops, getting the character dynamics really going, and has some of the best comedy in my opinion. So I feel if like for me that was my hook in point by which I was kind of like, okay, this is great.
Honestly, to kind of go more into depth about what I thought of the show, I was kind of hooked on it from episode 1, but at the same point, it was a different kind of hook than the later episodes. Like I won't necessarily say episode 6, but either 5 or 6, without going into details at the point, that was when I realized, oh, this is like it's hooking me even more now for different reasons than I thought of at the beginning. And going back to the show and rewatching it for the podcast, I also found out that the show actually really cleverly sets you up for it, and there's a good chance you may not even notice it the first time through.
Rewatching was really interesting. And I do actually want to say, like, when you said you were hooked into the first episode, I remember, like, the first opening scene before the show music, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be something that I'm into. So I get what you mean about, like, hook versus the bigger hook.
Right? Because there's the hook of like, okay, I like this, I think I'll keep watching, and the hook of, oh, shit just got real. And that has nothing to do with some of the shit that's literally real in this universe. But I guess we'll get to it. So I think it's a show that's kind of hard to talk about without spoilers. So should we just go into it?
Yes, because I want to talk about Blue Blood since that was the episode that hooked me. But the problem is it sets sort of the arc.
So with that said, to the people who haven't seen the show, spoilers are starting now. Go watch the show. It's great. Come back later. We'll start it in 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
You still here? Good. Everyone is a lizard people in this universe. There you go.
Yeah. Including Mark Zuckerberg, which explains a lot, along with Taylor Swift and Judge Judy. Yeah. But Blue Bloods is an episode that starts like it's going to be an HR sensitivity course about trying not to hurt lizard people. That is by punching them in the face when they try to hug you, which is actually a problem Reagan has. Anytime someone tries hugging her, our main character, she punches them, and she actually knocks out Brett's tooth when he demonstrates as part of sensitivity training. And so you think it's going to be one of these episodes where Reagan does a shortcut by building Dr. Octopus arms and using...
Okay, good. I'm not the only one who thought about that. Good.
Even they thought about it. Mick said that she's on the verge of being a supervillain.
Yeah, well, but that's just Reagan in general, let's be honest. In the first episode, she makes a president AI which almost destroys the world. Like, she would be a supervillain with or without the arms.
And not to talk more about, like, the episode where we go with Rafe Masters, where the entire point was how close she hits at being a supervillain, or the finale at which the entire question is how ethical or unethical should she go, etc., etc., etc. She's been on that weird
I guess,
husk
it's a good thing.
Villainy.
Yeah.
Let's say that this is a show where the main character isn't necessarily the hero, she's the protagonist. Take it as you will.
Yeah. Her saving
But
grace is that she's not as bad as her father, Rand, the founder of the company and former CEO. And so Rand basically raised up Reagan to follow in his footsteps after he got fired from Cognito Inc. Though she says she doesn't want to be like him because he got fired for trying to blow up the sun, which she claimed would cure
yeah.
skin cancer. Rand basically
Wait.
made Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty look like a good father. So
Actually,
Yeah.
this is a debate I remember you two having, Jaya and Haddock, about if you like Rand or not.
I love
And
Rand. I
Rand?
love him. He's horrible, and that's why I love him. He's like a worse Grunkle Stan, to go back to the Gravity Falls analogy.
No,
yeah.
he was Uncle Ford. Stan isn't smart enough to blow up the sun. All respect to
Okay,
him.
fair enough. He combines the worst of both of them. We'll do
Yeah,
it that
he's like-
way.
It's like if the cloning department lady merged the twins and gave him
Oh,
the
God.
character from Mr. Robot, because Rand's
Yeah.
voice actor Harold's from that show.
Mhm.
But
And speaking of which, just because of that, Wolf, I'm curious. What do you think of Rand?
I really liked him. I liked the, kind of old cantankerous man who's genuinely just awful to literally everyone. And I really do hope that there is no lesson for him to learn. He's just an awful human being, and he continues to be an awful human being.
Well, honestly, I thought they were gonna go with him learning a lesson in the finale, where Reagan calls him out for tampering with her memories, and then he just comes back out of nowhere. It's like, yeah, most of the company's stockholder is mine, so I'm in boss.
Well,
I'm
and
the
what's
boss now.
interesting is that's set up in episode 2, because episode 2, Rand's subplot is him blackmailing the CEO with an old
Yeah.
karaoke video in
Mhm.
exchange for the shares.
Talking about Rand's character development, I think would be really good because you can really watch it, especially the second time through, watching how they set everything up. And the reason
Yeah,
I like Rand
exactly.
is, well, first of all, he's hilarious, but also his personality is one of the biggest crux of the show. Without Rand evoking a lot of emotions in you, whether you're laughing at how horrible he is, or getting irritated at how horrible he is, or, this show is about Reagan and Rand in so many aspects.
Mm.
So
That's true.
you have to have him be one of the most impressionable characters to the audience. And I think they achieved that.
Oh yeah, but again, like you said, he's a terrible person. He's awful in any mean of the in any way you can look at it.
Right.
But like
He has
Haddock said, I love him for how horrible he is. He's hilarious in the context of the show.
That's the thing. He's great to watch, but if you're in this universe, like if you relate to Reagan, you know he's terrible. And I think the difference between Rand and Rick is that Rick does terrible things and he claims he gets away from the consequences of his actions, but without spoiling Rick and Morty, he actually has a lot of karma hit him. He suffers a lot because he's an adrenaline junkie, and a therapist bluntly tells him, if you keep going this way, you're gonna die young because you cannot handle boring routine. Rand doesn't really have anyone who restrains him apart from his ex-wife Tamiko, Reagan's mom, who is also a narcissist.
But she's just a bitch, though. Again, I love her for being a bitch.
But she at least cares about Reagan. But with Blue Bloods, I felt that was the turning point in the series because the first 2 episodes just seemed to be conspiracy theory comedy and establishing how Reagan's bond develops with her new co-worker, Brett, who's a himbo. Like,
Yeah.
Brett's a himbo.
You're right.
He's not
Yeah.
Yes.
He's not stupid.
Okay,
He
since I
graduated
heard-
top of his class at Yale, but he is just so darn nice and good-looking. Privileged.
Since I heard them laugh, Wolf, let me guess that you like Brett. Am I correct to assume that?
Haddock said earlier, right, like Rand has to very much be very impressionable. And I would say, like, between the 2 characters that need to be the most impressionable, I would argue is Rand and Brett. Because they need to leave that impression on you because they are the 2, I guess you'd say, moral centers of, very, one being evil and awful, one being, good. Too good.
Yeah.
And just too pure and very much a himbo, not a dumb himbo, a smart himbo, but still a himbo.
Right, he's not stupid, he's naive, because it's mentioned he graduated top of his class at Yale, which is not an easy feat for anyone. He's also very strong. It's shown he can lift Reagan up when she's collapsed without breaking a sweat, and he takes on a fight with a killer robot president, only getting minimal injuries in the process. So Brett
Yeah,
is
but then in the episode you mentioned, we see that he's so impressionable that he thinks the other fraternity boys, bullying him is actually, being part of the thing. He wants to be their friend and he thinks that's the way,
yeah.
which honestly broke my heart. Like, I felt so sorry for that guy.
Well,
I'm so glad.
especially when he rescues Reagan despite being covered in rat bites, because basically the fraternity left him to crawl in the vents. And he sees a rat after overhearing they see him as a joke. He's like, maybe you'll be my friend. And then he gets swarmed by 100 feral rats.
Yeah,
It was
yikes.
awful and hilarious. But when he tries to rescue Reagan after her Doc Ock arms rip off a diplomat's arms, long story.
Yeah.
She's like, what the hell, man? Why are you letting people treat you like this? You're a good person. I think it's the turning point for them that Reagan says friends don't treat you like you're shit, that they're there for you. They rescue you when you need them, and they hear you out when you had a rough night. But for me, the turning point is that, so this whole hugging thing has been causing Reagan problems, which is why she brings the Doc Arms to do the hugging for her. And you think this is just going to be a silly episode about there are no shortcuts. You have to face your trauma, even if it takes 30 years of therapy, as Reagan's boss suggests. But then Rand comes to Reagan's trial, where she's accused of assault and attempted murder. And he says, does Reagan need a hug? And there's this huge beast behind him. And we find out this beast, who looks like a FNAF reject, is Barrow. And Barrow picks up Reagan and hugs her. And then we find out Barrow was made to hug Reagan from when she was a child, even if she didn't want hugs, and would carry her away holding her as she begged for him to stop. Rinse and repeat through decades of her life. And suddenly, Reagan and the audience realizes, what the fuck, Rand? You built a hugging trauma bot for me, and I repressed the memory. That's why I hate hugs, because you're a terrible father.
I am glad that you're bringing up this episode, Blue Bloods, especially because of something else that you said a lot earlier, where the first two episodes sort of feel like a little bit of, one conspiracy theory, then the next conspiracy theory. Whereas episode 3 is, as you just talked about, it's the point at which you really see the setup of Reagan's character struggles, both through Rand and through Brett. So as you just talked about, you see how Reagan is going to be fighting this entire series about her frustrations with her father being a shithead versus Reagan having to interact with Brett, who, even though we talked about him being too naive, is someone who she can relate to because he has a lot of repressed family trauma too.
Right.
And we can talk about the differences between Reagan's interactions with family trauma versus Brett's interactions. Both are realistic.
Yeah, because believe me, I want to talk about this. That's one of my
really
favorite
want to
aspects.
talk about this, so I'm glad that other people do.
It's worth.
But yeah, episode 3 is where we start to get that sense of where the through line of the character emotions is going to happen through the series. And going back to episode 10, and, HC saying, I thought Rand would show some character growth, that'd be too early. That'd be absolutely too early, given that this is the entire emotional through line of the show.
I didn't say that he needs a character, a growth in episode 10. I thought like that they tried to do a growth when Reagan tells him, peace out of here. And I like it when he comes back. He didn't go through it. He just saw an opportunity right after this entire shitstorm happened, and he took it. That's where one thing I like. But Wolf, I heard you wanting to say something. Sorry for cutting you.
Not a problem. No, it's worth I think pointing out. Right, we say Brett's naive. I think it's very much worth noting that he's naive in this world, in the world of conspiracy theories are real, and all of this nonsense that you think is real is actually fake. Blah blah blah. He's naive in this world. I do feel you put Brett in a normal world, and yeah, he's going to have some issues. He is maybe a bit too trusting, and and one of his major flaws is he wants everyone to like him. But you put him in a normal world, and he'd probably be just fine, more or less. You put him in this world though, and he's very much naive of everything, and that's fair, right? And again, like it goes along well with Reagan's very much cynical outlook on everything because she's been involved in this world since she was a child, essentially.
Yep. Not just that, Rand pretty much raised her, which should speak volumes of how messed up she is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we get to the space episode, we need to talk about that opening episode flashback. I don't want to bring it up now because regarding Rand's character development, you kind of hope he gets a bit of a realization when Reagan makes him testify at her trial.
Yeah.
She confronts him point blank about the fact that he's a terrible father, and he's forced to admit it on the stand and to actually give her a hug. Like, he finds it weird.
He swears. He swears by Godzilla 2000. Why was that reference there? I don't know why that specific movie, but sure, let's go with that. It's fine.
Maybe because The Shape of Water is too raunchy.
Well, they did mention it in this episode, and it brings up something I want to point out. So,
would you swear by fish fucking or monster fighting?
I mean, the end of the episode is literally lizard fucking, so...
Yeah, basically that, yeah.
Yeah. I do headcanon that to attend court-mandated therapy, though. Like, in addition to the group hug, that Judge Judy's like, you're going to therapy, bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of which, is there any other heavy theme to point out with episode 3? Because there's like a little joke there that I want to point out.
I'll just say, I wish, just because I know it pissed you off, that they would have swore over the 1998.
I knew you were going to mention it. I knew that he would swear by the 1998 quote unquote Godzilla.
I wish they would have.
Actually, considering Rand is such a shithead, you know what, it would have fit. So yeah, make him swear by that, because that way no one will take him seriously. But on that note, in the ceremony itself, when they celebrate, their achievements in 2021, and it says 2021, both of their achievements are, Shape of Water winning an Oscar, which this movie came out 2 years ago. So that's a lot. Yeah, and again, they do it again when I first started, I was really laughing about King K. Rool being in Super Smash Brothers, because that was a big deal when this was announced, and I laughed at it back then. It's still funny. But I'm like, wait, you're celebrating 2021 and you're talking about something which happened in 2018. Lizard people, you are a bit behind with your news. I'm just saying.
It's a funny catch. I did not notice that catch.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did, because I'm a video game nerd. What can you do? That made me laugh. So, what was there was something I want to point out with Reagan and Brett. So in a sense, I want to say that, at least in terms of how the marketing pushed it seemed like the show was gonna be about the two of them, eventually getting along. And in some sense, in some episodes, I get it. Like in episode 3, we just talked about that they have this honest conversation, and you can also see this in episode 1. And in other episodes where, they are polar opposites in the sense of Reagan is a workaholic, who's very antisocial, and she's really fucked up. Like we said, she could be a villain in another show. But he's just a nice, just a yes man, a nice guy who could kind of go with everything you tell him to do, for better or worse. But he's also, his family, we find out, also neglected him, but in a different way. They just found different ways to cope with the pain. And I found it really interesting, and I think it's a really good dynamic between these two. The thing is, if this is what they were going for, I think the show focuses a lot more on Reagan than Brett. But that's a note for maybe season 2 would do something with this. But I just want to bring this up, that I like the dynamic. I just think for something that was pushed from episode one and marketing and everything, I think it's kind of underplayed.
I don't trust marketing. Marketing is usually done by people who aren't the show creators anyway. So
That's true.
basically, they're going to be doing a presentation of basically the first half of the series, which is what the first half of part one was Reagan and Brett getting
Right.
along. And then by the half point of part one, they've gotten along. That plot line is done.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I don't have any problem with marketing making that the enticer, because once you've gotten enticed by that, then the story itself will, flesh
Right.
itself out and we're already hooked. So, marketing was fine for doing it that way.
Yeah, I think so. And more importantly, regardless of where their bond ends up, it becomes clear that JR made the right call in hiring Brett if for the wrong reason. JR is the CEO of Cognito Inc. And he hires Brett because he had a firm handshake at a family barbecue. Because, that's
I
how...
wish it was this easy.
But Brett finds out Brett can be Reagan's emotional center and conscience, and she encourages him to stand up for himself. And so it becomes a symbiotic relationship that she inspires him to be braver and more proactive, and he inspires her to be more compassionate and to be kinder to herself, most importantly. Because Reagan is...
And we kind of see him returning the favor in the final episode where he goes into her memory of when she was younger. When he takes her to the prom, he kind of teaches her what she taught him. Which let's not start talking about time paradoxes and shit. But it's pretty cool.
It is, and it felt like a middle finger to the BoJack Horseman episode with a similar concept because. Because for context, Reagan's like 13 and Brett's in his 30s in the flashback, and Brett's in his 30s. And so they're like, why don't I take you to prom? And she's like, isn't that kind of creepy that an old man is taking me to my prom and I'm just a teenager?
Or playing on an old stereotype. Neither of them are derivative of each other. It's an old stereotype to have the kid bringing in an old person who's too old to a prom. So they're just referring back to that.
Fair. I just found like having just seen Escape from LA around the same time. I was just like, oh god. I feel like the crew, it was an in-joke between the crew. That people watching adult cartoons would be remembering that episode of Escape from LA. No spoilers, but it's... What would be a good word for it, Haddock?
It's maybe a reference.
Well, basically, it sets the tone for how the rest of the series goes after season 2.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that since I don't think we should spoil for other shows in this Inside Job podcast. So
considering I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I'm not going to give my opinions on it.
No worries, but it felt like the in-joke. And fun fact, if you're going to talk about in-jokes, Barrow is also the name of Mabel's ventriloquist puppet.
Now that one I think was intentional. That I think was an actual in-joke because they're coming from the same studio. They know what they did previously. And especially with that concept in Gravity Falls of everyone's afraid of Barrow.
Except
and
Mabel.
Barrow being a childhood comfort object. The fact that they twisted it into Inside Job. Yeah, that did feel like a hark back.
Yeah. I mean, the memes practically started on YouTube. If you look up Barrow, like if you see Inside Job Barrow, you have people quoting Dipper saying no one likes Barrow, and vice versa.
I just want to someone go to YouTube and make a song called "We Don't Talk About Barrow No."
Oh.
That was my Encanto reference of the episode. Thank you and good night. But so we just talked about all this. Wolf, is there anything you want to bring up? Something that stood out to you?
In regards to a specific episode?
Just the show in general.
Show in general? Not inherently so. Like I said, right? Like, we talked about how, I know you said the hook point for you was definitely episode 6. Only thing I would say is for me, it felt like I would say episode 8 more than 6, personally. Don't get me wrong, episode 6 and 7 and all the episodes for it that came were good. It's just, again, like I said, right, I enjoyed it. I was having fun with it, but nothing was fully hooking me in until about episode 8. And I will say, I'm probably one of those people who, I love Rand, but I also hate Rand because some of the characters in the show, I think, do suffer from I go back to it, the Mark Beeks problem of they're too good at the job
I
they're
knew it.
supposed to do. And
Yeah.
Rand is one of those characters. He's too good at being an asshole sometimes. And I want to laugh at the jokes you're doing because they're funny, but also I just hate him at this point.
I agree.
It would be
Like,
interesting to talk about the other characters just as far as how much they make an impression.
Hmm.
But you
Mhm.
bringing up episode 8 is something I think we should really talk about because
Oh,
we talked
God.
about how episode 3 is sort of the beginning point at which we see the triangle that Reagan's going to have to deal with.
Mhm.
Episode 8 is where it locks into the plot much more.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
because that's where
Yeah.
you really get into Reagan's connections with Rand much more. Episode 3, you have
The-
the hug. Episode 8, it's about her actually sort of starting to appreciate him.
Yeah, and because let's not mince words here. Rand fucked her up big time.
Yeah. Like-
But you can also see that she took some of the good things in him or things that were bad about him and got carried over to her. She learned how to use in a positive way, and she's learning from his mistakes in
Right.
in a sense. And
Right.
and also actually, how many of you thought that they were actually gonna say that Buzz Aldrin is her father?
I did not.
Felt like
She
it
and
wasn't
Rand have
supposed to
too much
happen.
design characteristics in common and personality
Exactly.
characteristics in common.
Yeah.
That I was just like, nope, it's him. It's him.
I
mean-
figured they wouldn't, but I kind of hoped they would. Just because I was curious to see where they would go with it at that point if they did, but they didn't, which obviously makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. I mean, also the fact we naturally know that she's Rand's daughter is that opening, which is very wrong. And I was actually
Okay, you know what? You know
gotta
what?
talk about the opening of that
I wanted to keep it. I wanted to keep it. So I'm just gonna say that when I went into episode 8, Jaya already finished the show, and she told me, "Hey, listen, the opening to episode 8 might piss you off. It might trigger you." And I'm like, "Oh God, what's gonna be in the opening of episode 8? What is gonna be?" And there's a Ninja Turtles reference.
Oh
And
gosh,
I'm
I was
like-
laughing my ass off.
And
It
I'm
is
like,
so wrong. Because as a kid, Reagan loved watching TMNT, and I'm assuming it was probably the 2012 version or so, or the 2000 era. And she shows her dad that she gave her pet turtles radiation and bandanas to mutate them.
yeah.
He's like, oh, that's cute. Nice going. You gave your turtles cancer.
Yeah.
Laughing
So
at her.
funny.
And then he's like, okay, time to mercy kill these. You take the gun, and I'll show you how to aim it. And it's like, oh my god. Because on the
And
one
it's
hand,
like,
you're
you
saying
know,
love is wrong, but on the other, the way Reagan's face screws up as a kid while she's crying, when she realizes poisoned her pets with the best of intentions.
Yeah, but it's one of those that, yeah, it's wrong, but also I like the idea that, because honestly, what kid growing up with Ninja Turtles wouldn't want to try that, to actually mutate their pet turtles so that they could do ninjutsu and shit? So I get it. It's fucked up, but it, again, kind of the sense of the show and Ren's character. It's fucked up, but I'm laughing.
For
So
legal purposes,
I-
the Outcast does not condone giving your turtles radiation.
Mhm. Especially if your name is Michael Bay.
Oh god.
Okay, which, you know, now that I think about it, if they actually did this intentionally to reference that movie, I'm not sure what to think about it. But that's for another time. Oh, that's for another time. So regarding episode 8, again, I think it's the perfect episode for that point of the show, because at this point we already know Reagan inside and out. We know, you know, we saw her going through a bunch of things. We saw her opening up. We saw her making mistakes. We saw her trying herself at her work, you know, overthinking about things. We even saw her bonding with her, you know, with her pet robot president who tried to destroy the world. we saw all of that, and we see her slowly. We slowly see that her parents, especially Rand, kind of fucked her up as she grew up. So I think this was the perfect point to actually to really show how much she is his daughter, both biologically and in terms of personality, just before the final two episodes kick in, where it's basically a really major theme. I think it was like
what's actually tragic about this is Rand seems to undergo character development. He kind of acknowledges his relationship with Ray and how his marriage dissolved is messed up. Like, he acknowledges, like, he shows at times concerns for Reagan's well-being, like, because Buzz Aldrin seems to be the ideal father figure to Reagan. He praises her inventions, asks for her insight, and treats her to cotton candy on the moon. And so you think maybe, and Reagan's hoping maybe this guy, if we're related, it means I'm not doomed. But then...
That's the reason why she goes along with the checkup to begin with.
Right. And, well, actually, she also said she went to go check on them because she wanted to go on a mission and get away from Rand, even if it meant dying. And she's like, that's fine. When JR warns her, you could probably die on this mission, she's like, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Brett goes
honestly, JR is basically giving them the most random missions no one should ever receive on any kind of job, and they're like, yeah, sure, let's do this. We're ready.
I mean, this is the same guy that bought an ex-villain's lair, and with the plan to rent it out to other villains as an Airbnb while stealing employee pensions to fund the down payment. So
there you go.
It's on par for him. But what's hilarious and what's sad about it is Rand goes and stows away because he says Buzz Aldrin stole his sunglasses. And so Brett decides to go along with him because, Brett is a himbo, thinks the best of people. But they find Neil Armstrong buried in the moon dust. And they realize that Buzz Aldrin must have killed him. And so Rand's first reaction is actually the first decent moment he has in the show. He realizes he needs to warn Reagan. And so provides the hope that maybe they can mend this bond. Maybe despite the fact that he's a terrible father, they could move forward. And then the season finale crashes all that to the ground. And we realized Rand never changed at all.
Yeah, which, again... Yeah, like Haddock was about to say, I think that was the point. They were basically tricking us right there.
So basically, Rand is very well created in this complex sense. So episode 8 is where we see the peak of where he does care about Reagan, but we've seen this throughout the entire show. Like, when we were introduced to Barrow at first, and all the other inventions to quote-unquote protect her, like, the boy repellent perfume that he gave her for her birthday one year. All this stuff has been building up where we see that he does a whole lot of subversive crap that hurts her and improves his own gain. But, there's also possibly that sense of fatherly pride underneath it all as well. So, episode 8 is the point at which we see the potential fatherly pride at its most possible. But he's always been a complexity of wanting her to achieve because of his own selfish gains, too. And even in episode 8, that is still very clear. Him complaining about the paternity test, Reagan outright says, isn't this just to prove you're right? And he's like, can't this be both? And that is the crux of Rand's character. Can't this be both?
And boy, is it both.
When Reagan was legit in danger, that his first reaction was to protect her, which we hadn't seen in any other episode. Like, when she was kidnapped during my Big Flat Earth wedding, he wasn't the one worried about her. Her mother was. Tommy, the narcissist Tomiko, sees her daughter being held at gunpoint in an escape boat and goes, Mama's coming. And Rand comes along, not to save Reagan, but to argue with his ex-wife. And it gives the hope maybe Rand is obviously a terrible person, but maybe he's starting to realize it.
Which, by the way, I love how at the end of that episode, jumping there for a second, he's actually about to remarry Reagan's mom, and Reagan is just like, nope, and she calls one of her coworkers to just like take him away.
It's one of the best subversions. I loved it.
Yeah, that was amazing. So before we move on from episode 8, Wolf, you
Mhm.
said this is the episode that really hooked you on the show.
Mhm.
Is it because everything we just talked about, or was there
Yep.
something else about it? Oh, okay.
I have nothing I can say or add really. Yeah, again, like it's the culmination of, like, I've talked about it in the past, right? I really enjoy stuff that has those plot through lines, and there's some through lines here before episode 8, but I feel episode 8 really picks into that, really digs into those through lines, and you see it from episode 8 onwards. And I feel like when they do release part 2 to this, you'll see more of that carried through from this point onwards, that everything else before this was set up to get you into the idea of what Reagan's relationship with Rand, Brett, and her other coworkers is, and why all these different relationships are bad for her and in some ways good for her, and why she needs to work on all of that and get rid of those horrible people in her life, which is what she tries to do at the very end, is get rid of one of those horrible people in her life and keep the ones who are worth keeping.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So if we're talking about episodes in random, there's one I want to talk about because the B plot of it just kills me, and I want to talk about it. So episode 4. And before Jaya brings it up, I'll just say it, that yes, if you've seen The Good Place, Brian is a lot funnier when you know who the voice actor is.
Mhm.
That is true.
It
But
is.
the other, I actually don't want to talk about the dating app plot, aside from the fact that Reagan just having a specialty team come in whenever she accidentally says something about her job to just abduct the damn person, and they never
Yeah.
hear from him again.
Well,
That's
serves them right for watching a Bourne something cool. Like, serves her right for agreeing to go to a movie like that for her first date. Like, going to a movie
yeah.
for a first date is an amateur move because you can't
Mhm.
escape.
Yeah, but still, just the fact that it's a thing that not just for her, just in general. If you accidentally talk about your job there, it's like, oh, okay, guess I fucked up. Sorry, team taken. But
Makes me
the
wonder
plot I want to
though
talk,
why Rand never
yeah,
They
did
do
it to his
never meet.
wife after he divorced her.
Interesting point.
I think it's probably because Glenn still loves her. Like, even though they're divorced, he goes to marriage counseling with her once a week, even if he doesn't get the point of it. And
yeah.
so she's at least trying to make it work in that episode because the
Oh, no, I
moment that
mean Rand, not Glenn.
Oh,
With Tomiko, Rand said he invented the memory wiping technology, so maybe one of the stipulations was no one touches Tomiko, since he does still love her.
Fair.
could be.
On
And
both counts.
he
Plot
like I
hole,
mentioned,
and yeah.
It could
like
be.
I just mentioned, he was ready to initiate another, a remarriage to her at that point. So maybe he's in denial. You may never know.
It's a
Well,
Right.
there's
conspiracy
a whole
theory.
other thing where this is a very, very, very recent divorce. I mean, that's the entire crux of part 1 is
Yeah,
he's
because
just moved in.
yeah, in episode
Yeah.
3, we still see that we see that they are just done getting all of his stuff into Reagan's house. So yeah.
Yep. And which is
Well,
how he rebuilds Barrow after Barrow's presumably been lying conscious, dismantled for years,
mhm.
and never
So
growing.
I just want to talk about in episode 4. Not the dating app, not the dating app plot, even though it is funny, but the plot where Brett and Dolphman are doing a switch. And for the record, because they mention it, I love Face Off. It's such a stupid ass movie, but I love it for it. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, get all of your friends and watch it. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. And to those who don't know, the plot of it is that John Travolta and Nicolas Cage change faces. Not that's the plot of the movie. But they change faces, but they also kind of expect you to believe that that just changing the face already gives Nicolas Cage the body. Nicolas Cage still looks like Nicolas Cage. John Travolta still looks like John Travolta. they just change their faces, but the entire actors are changed when you see them on screen.
The only thing you
And
need to know about that movie is that John Travolta embodies his best impression of Nicolas Cage, and it is wonderful.
that's what makes this movie so amazing. One of the things that makes it so amazing. Like,
John
it's like
Travolta
looking at a
truly
mirror,
gave it his
only.
all, and I love it for it.
It's like looking at a mirror, only not. I love it. So basically, so in terms of the movie, they just switch the faces, but when you see them on screen, they're the same actors, obviously, even though they have different body shapes and everything. So I love that not only do the reference they do face off, but also that the first time they do it, it's actually a complete fuck up, and they literally just switch the faces. And when they look at each other, they go, what the fuck happened? This is not how it was supposed to be.
When we talk about the season finale, remind me to bring this up because it actually is some interesting foreshadowing about
it does. I was thinking about that too.
I missed it. Okay, we'll get to it in the season finale, but
what's hilarious about this bet is also Brett in marriage counseling in Glenn's body.
Yeah.
because for the whole episode, technically Brett lost the bet. He begged to change back first, which would have been an easy win for Glenn. But Glenn is enjoying being in the hot himbo body.
Yeah. Wait, by the way, I love, you can't shop here looking like that. Oh, god damn it, this changed. No, you're too hot to be in the store. You need to go over there. We are not worthy of you. That got me. That was really funny.
Oh, also, Brett's lesson is always carry a credit card and some cash when you're going to buy coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, a kid might kick you in the shin when you ask their mother for a few bucks.
Yeah, among other things.
Yeah,
So another episode I really liked and want to talk about is actually the episode right after episode 4, episode 5, The Breakfast Club, because let's do an episode that's just a big homage to the 80s, because 1, why not, and 2, it's fun to make fun of the 80s. So for one, my little side note, when Reagan goes into the Blockbuster and just starts watching all of the movies simultaneously, this is what the life of a film major is like, people. I can confirm it. This is literally what it is.
Watching 8 movies at the same time?
Oh yeah, you have no idea. This is how movie majors cram for tests, okay? This is literally it. They got it on the head. And I very sadly had to do this once or twice, but I passed, so that's what's important. So just wanted to point out that this little bit actually really hit home. Another small joke I like is that, so we have, what's the name of the alien again? I forgot it.
Mike?
What's his name? Yeah, Mike. So he has amnesia. So he has amnesia from falling down from the plane and being hit in the head. And the kid, and obviously the kids bring him home and watch over him because that's how 80s stuff goes. By the way, one of them is, man, I can't believe I forgot. What's her name?
Gigi?
No, like the actress, Kate Micucci. One of them is Kate Micucci for whatever reason.
Right, okay.
I don't know why. But then they mentioned President Reagan, and then it's like, Reagan. Why does this name, engulf so much anger in me? It's like, doesn't matter. I really like that part. I thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting how they homaged both E.T. and Stranger Things, because Stranger Things by itself is supposed to be very nostalgic. I've only seen like the first 2 episodes of it.
Yeah, it's because it follows that 80s formula of you have the few kids, and one's the smart kid, one's the leader, one's the goofball, so and in a sense Stranger Things follows on that formula because that was the 80s. So yeah, anyone wants to add something to it?
I'm good.
Hello?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'll just say that I think it was also a really good episode for Brett, and learning more about him, and that underneath this entire lovable, smiling guy, you see that he has a lot of baggage as well, and that he legit loves the people he works with. They did become his legit family. I thought it was touching, so that was great,
I
and
really.
also
Oh, go
all,
ahead.
all the people there, all the people in the 80s town wanting to go back to the 50s. And it's like, oh, I guess nostalgia really blinds us all. We just want to go back to when times were simpler. I like that too. I'm done.
That was good. Yeah, I was just wanting to think about that Brett family trauma because, yeah, it
Mhm.
was episode 5 where you get the kicker and realize. I think, well, episode 3, it started to unravel this idea of him as a perfectly likable, happy person because the frat people didn't actually respect him. But Brett still believed that they liked him. Episode 5 is where you see that he was suffering through things, and that Brett's family trauma is a response by an intense desire of likability and forced positivity, while Reagan's trauma is to be more negative, bitter, and have social isolation and prioritize work over people. And what I loved about them revealing that about Brett is not only putting something in common between Reagan and Brett, is that it's very realistic towards people that
Mhm.
I have met. I have met people who have done both of these responses to trauma.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Which again,
it
it's
also
it's
never
one of the
puts one
sorry.
over the other either, right? It never makes you feel like, oh, one is worse. No, they're both very equal traumas in how we cope and deal with things and how life changes us, especially as kids, and how those interactions and relationships with families can very much dictate how you feel and how you act towards others in the future. I love the fact that neither is given more than the other. They're both shown that, hey, this is how these two characters can relate to one another and how they can grow moving forward from learning from each other and their respective traumas and how they both dealt with it individually and
Mhm.
separately.
Yep, I
Absolutely.
totally agree. And again, going back to something I talked about before, this is what I'm talking about with showing the connection between these two, that they are very different types of people, but at the core of it, they are also very similar. And in a sense, not necessarily in the romantic sense, because I know people are gonna take it there, but just because that they literally complete each other, because Brett shines where Reagan doesn't, and Reagan shines where Brett doesn't. And episode 1 really shows you that Reagan built this robot, so obviously she knows how to beat it, but Brett is a lot more of everyman. He's a lot more in shape, so he can help Reagan get to the robot, and essentially both of them save the day. They are a good team. They are a unit. I really like that.
At the same time, it also has some really comedic undertones of sort of the real life event of, like the you know, lesser experienced but good looking and charismatic white man getting the position despite the scientist doing all the hard work. So they have some of those little joke punches in there. But I like that that's not where it stopped. That's not the
Hmm.
end of what Brett ended up being, which is what at
Right.
first I thought they were going to just have him as, and that wasn't
Me
very
too.
appealing to me. But having Brett
Yeah.
actually as someone who was a good compliment to Reagan, genuinely, because they have some of the same underlying through lines, that's cool. And I like
It
how they've
is.
developed that.
Agreed.
And
It took a
especially
bit to realize, but once I did, it definitely made his character a lot more endearing and enjoyable to watch and see where they proceeded with. So if you're like me and you're getting into it and you're like, God, I hate Brett, just wait for
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
yeah.
By the way, I just want to point out that Wolf likes the Stokules from the DuckTales reboot and will defend him, but he didn't like Brett at first. Wolf, what do you have to say for yourself? Because you
I
need to
like
defend
my
yourself from
himbos. I
them.
didn't say Brett got on my nerves. I should be clear. I didn't hate him. He just got on
Oh,
my nerves. But once you get to a certain point, you see that okay, they're going and planning to do more with this character. You can tell that I'm going to stick with it for now. I'm going to see where you go with this because you have my interest a little bit more now because I see you're going to try and do more. And again, I just like my himbos: Storkules, Geralt from the Witcher series, and Brett, and many others besides.
Yeah.
Well, so we are slowly going through the episode. So, Haddock, I have a question for you, which kind of transitions us to another episode. What were your thoughts about Grassy Knoll Atkinson?
Oh my gosh. that Grassy Knoll Atkinson, that was the shooter guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And there's a very specific reason I asked you that, and you probably know what it is.
I'm pretty sure because you're probably hitting it right at it, because Alex Hirsch was doing his McGucket voice.
Exactly.
And I just always glitched. And there are YouTubers who have taken McGucket and given him Grassy Knoll's voice, and
I'm
it
sure.
fits way too perfectly.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing, that it's not just let's just let Alex Hirsch do the McGucket voice, but it's just that it works so well with this writing and this idea that the guy who shot JF Kennedy, and they're like, oh, okay, you know what? We don't need him. We don't need him. We can fire him. And then everyone's like, you're firing him, but he's the most beloved worker here. Like, fuck you, Reagan.
Who, by
Get
the
rid
way,
of him.
and you've
It
been
was a
through
funny
this.
twist.
Yeah.
I loved it. And then that they actually have to create this giant JFK monster in order to get him back and show that he's valuable to the company and they can't axe him. It's just great. It's great satire. And also, again, that voice coming out of that madman, just, it's brilliant. You could have just said, inside joke, whoever gets it, but no, they went above and beyond with it. It wasn't just a simple reference. It was a legit thing to enhance the comedy, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And it also shows that, this group is actually a group. That I think that's the first time we actually see them, completing a task as a team,
Right.
together when they're trying to stop the JFK monster.
Right. And also it's the first time the team actually has Reagan's back, because they find out, because for reasons Reagan's hand is cloned, and Gigi, one of her co-workers, has a nose for gossip and secrets, because she feels that if she's ever going to be betrayed, she needs to have blackmail material on everyone. Probably wise, given where she works. But they find out that, remember the robot president from the pilot? It turns out Reagan didn't scrap him. She has him in a confinement tube and bribes him with seasons of friends to keep him docile.
Which they actually showed us at the end of the pilot, and I love how he actually calls her out on it, like, really, you're gonna let me watch a sitcom? And she legit tells him Netflix paid like $1 million to have episodes of this show, and he's like, oh man, humanity really is going downhill, and then he gets addicted.
I keep thinking she should have showed him The Good Place, since that's a very actually good treatise on morality, but whatever floats his boat. And fun fact, that's Storkules playing the president. So
wait, really?
Yeah. Chris Dienmap. I can't pronounce his last name.
I was about to say that he's the guy that did Darkwing Duck in that show, but okay. That was an unintentional reference I made earlier. Cool.
Well, the president does get dangerous in the finale, the robot president. But what's funny about it is the crew finds out using Reagan's cloned hand to get access, and they're like, why shouldn't we bust you? And she points out, but he's valuable because he watches all of the security feeds for entertainment. And so the robot president, actually provides useful in trying to pin down the clones and getting rid of them, including also for Tupac, interestingly enough, and other celebrities thought to be dead or soon to be dying. And so they decide to cover her when JR asks what the heck happened. Brett and Reagan lied that they decided to fire the cloning department instead and liquidate it because it was using too much in refrigeration costs. And he's like, actually, that's a good idea. And Gigi doesn't spill the beans that the robot president is alive and confined and now addicted to friends.
One thing I want to point out about episode 2, so you have the cloning chick who has this thing on her that just when she goes, not gonna clone the entirety of you. And then he goes, she will. I Is it bad that I want more of this character in season 2? I think they can do a lot with it.
It can if she wasn't fired because of her department being liquidated.
Okay,
But she
so
might come back for revenge.
here's the thing is, as Jaya talked about with the hand coming back, is a lot of the little things in this show do come back, and it's very gratifying. The president isn't just a one-off. The robot president, ends up being a through line and plot relevant by the end. Reagan's cloned hand, which at first seemed like a throwaway joke, comes back multiple times, very
Yeah.
importantly in the finale episodes. So there's lots of these things where what they left open in part 1, I could see coming back, especially, for instance, Buzz Aldrin.
Mm-hmm. Well, guess we'll see. So,
or
moving on. Yeah, go ahead, Wolf.
the robot Reagan who disappeared.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yes.
That
Yeah,
did
we definitely
nothing, so I'm expecting that to come back.
Good call.
Wait, didn't Reagan legit beat her or
No,
something?
she
beat
won,
her,
but the body
when
was
the
never
Statue
found.
came to pick up Robo Reagan, the body was
Okay, right, yeah, it was just
But,
left there.
On that note, how many layers of existentialism does that episode have? Because Reagan finds out from Robotus, who she rides with more episodes of Friends to make her a dating algorithm. And
Yeah.
so she makes a robot clone of the guy she thinks will be her soulmate to practice on him. And she eventually decides to date him for reasons rather than pursue the real Brian. But this guy goes through a lot of existential crises due to being a robot, so she keeps reducing his intelligence and his willpower, much to his displeasure. And so he builds a robot Reagan that would be perfect. And so it's like, so you've got a person building a robot of a real person, the robot building a robot of a real person, and the second robot wanting the real Brian. And so it's like, this is going way off the rails.
Yeah, I think someone just saw the movie Ex Machina and was like, we can do that, but way more fucked up and just way more fucked up.
Can we
On
just
that note, I'll be really happy if William Jackson Harper keeps playing the neurotic normal person.
I mentioned this before, that if you watch The Good Place, this episode becomes a hell of a lot funnier when you know what other character he plays.
He also plays the same character type in Dogs in Space as a very nervous bulldog, and of his team.
Yeah, but that came after, so
Yeah. What's ironic is he's also in the Electric Company, but he plays a villain in that. And I showed HC a video where William Jackson Harper got into a rap battle with Lin-Manuel Miranda in the Electric Company.
And I still don't know how to process that, but that's a topic for another day. Where we try to convince Wolf that Lin-Manuel Miranda is already amazing and doesn't need to sing the Rescue Riders theme.
Nope. Absolutely has to sing the Rescue Riders theme. And George R.R. Martin has to write an episode of Rescue Riders. Otherwise, they're not cool.
I hate you.
There you.
Okay,
I love these, so it's all working out. It's all working out.
Haddock, do you like Wolf? Because we need a vote here.
Not voting on this.
Okay.
Yeah, you could
Extraction team.
write an episode of Rescue Riders, but he would never turn it in on time because he claims he's gonna make it a 5-book series that never gets told.
Oof. Just went there. Oof.
No, it'll be like, George, this is supposed to be a kids show. Can we tone in the bodies?
No, all the bodies. That would make it better.
Listen, if in
He's
George
like,
R.R. Martin's version of Rescue Riders, Winger goes out to kill Toothless to become the new Alpha, I'm all for it. Let's do it.
You monster.
I am not gonna comment on that. All I'm going to say is, speaking of Reagan's dating life, episode 7.
What a segue.
Wow.
Yeah, so that follows up from my big Flat Earth wedding because the end of the episode had Reagan send a distress signal to MI6 after Flat Earthers take over her mother's wedding.
See, that's why my big Flat Earth wedding is one of my favorites, it's just peak comedy of the combination of factors that it felt like watching an entire movie instead of watching a single episode. Just all the things that were going on at the same time. Andre being high, Glenn feeling inferior, Jeff Bezos trying to buy a boat, the marriage
Fucking
absurdity,
love
the
that.
flat earther absurdity. Like, there's so much going on, and just all of
Yeah.
it building on top of each other and crashing into each other in these perfect ways that made for a very well constructed plot somehow. Was
Mm.
Actually,
It's the perfect
speaking
Don't
of
storm.
that,
forget Brett pretending to be a Game of Thrones character and dressing up
Not
as
to
a
distract from episode 7, I'm sorry, but I just
and
like,
no,
oh my
no, no,
gosh,
no.
that's why I was
Actually,
fanning off 6.
no, but actually, but if I may say something I really love about 6-2 is that so Rand legit gets all of these people who believe in the flat Earth theory, all riled up, and just so that he could crush his ex-wife's wedding to herself. And then when
Right.
and then when he reveals it, and then when he actually reveals that he made all of that up, and he's like, wait, so you don't actually think the earth is flat? And he's like, of course the earth is not flat. What, are you stupid? Then the guy, not to
guns
quote him
on them.
here, but he took it personally, and he's now the villain. And they actually take him to the point, to the point where it's about to go to Hollow Earth, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna turn back. I'm gonna jump. And he legit jumps in there. And it's like, I hope this is followed up on. I
That's
hope this
another
is
one that has to
followed
be
up on.
followed up on in part 2 or wherever. You're right. Yeah, Harold, the
Yeah.
flat earther guy. Yeah.
But what's
Because
funnier about
don't
it is
think I didn't notice this show. I saw when you talked about Hello Earth, I saw the Godzilla drawing. You have to follow up on it now. The Godzilla
Yeah.
fan asks you to. You put it there.
Reagan also has some of the best lines in this episode. Like when Rand finds out via just a to-do list Reagan has that his wife's getting married, he thinks she's getting married to another guy. And when he finds out it was a narcissist wedding, he's like, did you just stage this to piss me off? And Tommy goes like, do you think everything has to be about you? Regan is just standing there with a very horrified
it's just peak comedy, and I think the reason why episode 6 was my pull-in point is, even though it wasn't like a plot-centric episode, is that it's just where everything starts to coalesce. Like, you know how there's those early episodes in a TV show where you can tell they're still figuring out their works, and then there's that
Yeah.
point in a TV series where they've got their groove on. 6 is where the groove finally settles in, and also it's where the side characters have some of their best moments. I'm not fully taken in with the rest of the team, Mike, Glenn, Andre, and Gigi. Like, I'm not really big fans of those characters, but episode 6 is where they were the best too. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's that
And-
groove hitting in.
And there's another Chekhov's gun about Andre is Reagan forces him to be sober and makes Glenn toss all of his drugs overboard. So he reveals that when he's sober, he has Tourette's syndrome and OCD. And I can tell you this, Scrubs has gone to an episode, you don't want to be a doctor with OCD. And so it's explained on later in the finale about this discrepancy. And the fact that Andre is only functional when he's high or drunk or both. But the other funny fact is Reagan has a very immortal line when the flat earther pulls a gun on everyone and Rand is surprised. Reagan just gets very frustrated and says, they're white people that communicate on message boards. Of course they're gonna have guns.
Another great line that I loved was Rand being angry at them and saying, you were gullible before, why can't you believe me now? And it's just such the truth of conspiracy theorists is they crack down and they get stubborn about their beliefs at the entire weirdest point. It's so true. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was good.
Yeah, that was great too. So, and kind of leading into it because, when episode 6 ends and Reagan just decides to say, you know what, usually I'm against guys hitting on me, but you know what, I'm going to think about myself, and she just hooks up with this guy. And I'm like, okay, go Reagan. You deserve.
Yes, she
you deserve
stand with who she thinks is a caterer because she thinks he's a British caterer, and so they'll never see each other again.
Yeah,
but then she wakes up in the next episode, and
then
she
it's
looks
like,
7.
room.
Yeah, so but for context, when this happened in episode 6, I'm like, okay, you know what? Go Reagan. She deserves one. She deserves to have actually something for herself, not just her walk being noticed. Just she can. She got something. She can have this one night thing, and then episode 7 starts right away, where it's like, oh God, she couldn't even have that go right. Even that somehow majorly blew up in her face. poor girl. But speaking of episode 7, I had no idea that this is what ghosting actually is. Actually faking your own death. Thanks for teaching me that show.
If only we could all do that.
Uh,
I mean, could you
um,
imagine if there was someone you wanted to avoid and you could just have Alex Hirsch doing his McGucket voice casually gunning you down with paintballs?
I love that he
And while you're
salutes to
getting a
Rafe
thumbs
too.
up, and then Wolf is Tommy Gold. I once sent a joke to Haddock. Would you give a thumbs up to someone who's helping you fake your death? And he said yes.
ah,
I
I was
don't
about
think
to
I
say.
did.
Oh,
I said
Uh,
what I said was I hope I'm not that bad of an actor. I'll probably mess it up somewhere else. That's what I said.
No, Haddock would be there to play the funeral music on a banjo. Obviously,
Oh
that's
yes, I'll be at my own funeral. Okay, but who doesn't want to crash their own funeral? Let's be real.
Fair.
I mean, you can clone yourself at that, with that cloning lab if it's not gone. But
yeah.
that's another song. But no, I love how the Wikipedia page for this episode actually has the line. Rafe gets the idea that her death was an inside job. Somebody did this on purpose.
Yeah.
Wikipedia team.
They do use the words inside job in that episode. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that too.
Yeah. Also, Haddock's right. I looked up the ask. He said, I hope I'd be a better actor than Reagan. I mean, I'm sure you would be, because you do very good acting.
Well, it doesn't matter whether I'm a good or bad actor. Most people are better actors than giving a thumbs up to their killer.
That whole scene, though. But it's interesting, because this is basically a homage to the Gravity Falls episode, The Hand That Rocks the Maple, and a general trope of someone that has to break up with someone, but doesn't want to be the bad guy. And the problem
And
is,
ironically enough, turning into a bad guy by the end of this, which
yeah,
is
because
actually kind of clever parody.
Because you would think that dating a James Bond agent would be amazing, and Brett thinks that Reagan is very lucky because she gets to hang out with an MI6 guy all the time. But the problem is, Rafe is a lot of things. For one, he can't accept no for an answer, and he pulls some strings so he can work with Reagan forever and move to the US just based on one night.
Yeah. And
And
by the way, this is the type of people you should probably think, if you're gonna keep in touch with in any kind of way. And talking seriously about this, one of the reasons Reagan is so afraid to tell Rafe no is because she just looks back at previous relationship she ended and how she being the one to break up caused her to look like the bad guy. She felt bad about being seen as bad, and not necessarily in terms of romantic connections, but as someone who had to leave a lot of toxic friendships in my life, I really get that because that's a legit thing you could experience. Thinking that if you are the one to cut connections with someone, am I being seen as the bad guy? And I think, obviously, this episode takes it to new extremes and stuff, and it ends in a situation, quite frankly, no one is gonna find themselves in. I hope, but it really hit that mark for me in terms of why doesn't she just say no, considering what we know about her.
And the reason why is that in a flashback, she was dating a coworker, but then she broke up with him in public when he offered her a pudding cup, saying he's boring and nothing about him interests her, and makes him cry while her other coworkers call her out and say she's a monster. So, to her
Yeah.
credit, she does try to break it gently to Rafe that she was drunk, which, yeah, that's the other thing. Both she and Rafe got sloshed before they decided to do the deed, which has a lot of implications that I've argued with people about.
Let's
Yeah.
not get into that.
But yeah, let's not. You know what, John?
That's
We don't have time.
that's a topic. That's a topic for another day.
But she does try to break it to him gently, but she makes the mistake of trying to break up with him in public again, because she tries to say we're too different. I only slept with you because I was drunk. But then he causes a scene which causes everyone to stare at them and glare at Reagan. And so she feels she doesn't have a choice but to lie and say, okay, let's stay together.
I feel like this, from a, not specifically like a character point, like Reagan's exact reasons, but this falls into a little bit of the commentary of the real life experience that a lot of women go through with that over obsessive or dangerous guy who gets interested in them that you're trying to escape from. That's where I looked at this episode from,
Right.
is that sort of thing. I'm like, oh, that is way too relatable, and
Right.
have several flashbacks going in my head of people that were similar to me.
It's even so much better because again, it's a James Bond stand-in as well, and looking at all those old movies and how they treat women in those old movies as well, and how that character's supposed to be, and then even going with the whole vibe between Skullfinger and Wraith as well, and again looking at the old James Bond films, like I love the levels of this, of what they're trying to show people and how they're getting it across is in this episode. I love it.
Right. And it's interesting that the hand that rocks the navel had it similarly, in that Gideon, who later becomes one of the villains in Gravity Falls, pressures Mabel into dating him, and he's like 8 and she's 12, and she just likes having him as a makeover buddy. And even Dipper warns her, guys are not like that. You don't throw a bone by going on a date with them, because they'll get obsessed. And so Dipper, in that episode, is more G-rated, so Dipper just goes and breaks up on his sister's behalf, which leads to Gideon trying to kill him with lamb shears. So in this one, Reagan's coworkers start making fun of her that she can't be honest with him, while Brett keeps talking about how he'd like to be in her shoes. And don't read too much into that. But finally, Gigi is like, look, you can't just ghost this guy. You can't ignore his text. You gotta fake your death and do ghost protocol. And the whole team pitches in to make sure it goes off without a hitch. But then it backfires, because Rafe notes that none of them are sad at her funeral, as she lurks in the corner in a sweatshirt and says, time to watch Great British Baking Show. But power to you, Reagan.
Yeah, I actually, when this line happened, I was like, well, I know Jaya like that line. I like that part.
Yeah. She only had to say Kids Baking Championship, and that would have won my respect for her eternally. But you take
But I guess Disney doesn't do copyright well, but what can you do?
Or Food Network. But in any case, Rafe gets suspicious about the fact that no one's really sad that Reagan is dead, even though she was his co-worker. And she obviously noticed that there was something suspicious about her death. It seemed to be an insight. It seemed to be a Cognito Inc. employee that gunned her down. So he uses Brett to crash his way into the group's poker night and interrogates them, thinking they killed Reagan. And Brett goes along with this because he's a himbo, and you know his problem. He can't say no to people.
Yeah.
And he's getting seduced by the spy life, as he admits, and Rafe in a different way. So Reagan tries to pretend to be the villain that killed Reagan to get the team out.
Which, by the way, I love how she goes, I'm gonna have to turn into the villain. Then she looks at her own reflection with the eye patch in the cannon and the trap, and she's like, oh.
Well, you notice they actually do that sooner, is when she first talks to Dr. Skullfinger and they're talking on the glass of the prison. He walks up to her as they're talking about whether or not she's a villain, and you see that shadow of the eye patch come across her face. And so they do that hint before the very end, where she has become the villain, actually wearing his clothing, actually wearing the eye patch, and seeing her reflection again there.
So the context is hilarious on why she's wearing it, because Dr. Skullfinger said he refuses to break out of jail because Rafe is a toxic person to deal with, something that Reagan agrees with, and they talk about how they'd both rather be watching Great British Baking Show than dealing with him. So he suggests, why don't you restart my memory wipe project? And then you could erase him forever from your life. But he also says, but can you feed my cat if you're going to go back? Because I don't think anyone's fed her. And the cat is an ass. Cats are. It claws her in the face and pees on her, so she has to wear the eye patch, and she breaks into Skullfinger's closet to get new clothes, which is why she's in the villain getup. So it's hilarious in context. Well.
I still maintain that villain getup is awesome, and if I did an inside job cosplay, I would be wearing that.
Fair. Very fair.
It is an awesome look.
And I like how they just leave Rafe and Skullfinger there, basically doing their kind of good guy bad guy banter, but there are also kind of flirtatious ways they are saying it, and they're just like, okay, we better leave these two alone and walk away. That's the last we see of those characters, and I love
Andre stays because he wants to watch, and he pulls up a chair.
But what can
I
but
do enjoy the final joke of this episode where they meet JR coming out and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And they ask him, "What are you doing here?" Silence. All right, we're gonna take the helicopter. All right, see you Monday.
Yeah.
I love that. That caught me a little bit
Yeah,
on mute.
They should warn him that he's gonna see a very kinky scene inside and Reagan's life. Let him deal with it.
We're off the clock.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just another day at the job for these people. And I assume this is where we are jumping into the two-part finale.
Yes, let's finally get to the finale.
So let's talk about the finale. Yeah, we didn't do this in order, but fuck it. It's time for the finale to close things up. So
it's an inside job.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so it seems like things are looking up for Reagan. She and Rand are actually getting along, which is shocking. And JR is doing his promotion to the Shadow Council, and he said he would promote Reagan if she proved she had become a better leader with Brett's help and not alienate her coworkers. And since she succeeded, he says, "You're getting promoted tomorrow. You're the new CEO." He's getting along with Brett. She's making her coworkers laugh and promising to get them more than totes, especially since Mick, as a mushroom fungi, can't use tote bags.
Yeah.
Like, everything's finally looking up.
And then, just like how everything is looking up, there's suddenly a problem. There's a mole in the company, and they need to find it. And that's another part, in the Reagan-Brett dynamic that I like. That obviously that Reagan wants to use kind of a truth serum on their friends, and Brett is like, "Don't you think it's a bit, unethical to do this?" And she says, "It's unethical, but we're doing this for a good cause at the end of the day. Just because it's technically a bad thing doesn't mean we're not, doing this for good intentions. It kind of makes it okay at the end of the day." And they have this sort of talk about it, which shows that again they are different, but at the same time they meet in the middle. They are again they complete each other in terms of that in a group dynamic. I like that. And then the actual mole is revealed, but I guess we're talking about this later. What depends.
Well, why not go right into it?
Okay, then honestly, making Barrow the mole is brilliant. And it's not something that is necessarily hinted at, but when you're looking at how this thing is programmed, when you see just how much Rand made this thing and what its purpose is, it makes complete sense that it's the mole. Like,
especially when he gets into his reasons.
It also plays onto a lot of tropes. Like, a lot of Inside Job does a lot of nods to the different tropes, the James Bond tropes or what have you. With Barrow, it's that idea of the robots turning against you based on their own programming. So it fulfills some of that referencing as well as being an interesting, unexpected plot move. Because I was sitting here, I'm like, it's not going to be Rand, it's not going to be anyone on the team. Who's it going to be? And, the throwaway lines about the mole people in the center of the earth wasn't enough to merit it being one of them, being an actual mole. So Barrow actually brought in all of the previous plot points through the entire series.
Right.
And actually, I did find it funny that when Reagan said it's not like just a suspect is just gonna fall off of the sky and then Rand, falls in through the ventilation shaft, and I'm like, oh, of course it's Rand. And I was kind of laughing at it because who would it be if not him? but then it's like, actually, it's not him. It's the thing he made. And another thing I
Yep.
really like about this first part is when they can't find the mole, and Reagan actually says that she's the mole, even though she isn't, but she's willing to sacrifice herself for her coworkers, which again shows how much she grew throughout the season. Because like in episode one, she wouldn't give a damn about these people. She would actually turn them in if there was even the slight chance they were a mole. But here she's just, okay, I'm gonna say I'm the mole even though I'm not, in order to protect my friends. And I like that for her. That it doesn't necessarily mean she's all the way fixed or anything, but it shows that she's growing, and I
Mm-hmm.
like that.
What I also like about it is that it really continues to set up the entire problem of what the season climax was about. Is does she choose her friends or does she choose Rand? And there's points where, she's actually choosing her father. We were talking about how episode 8 shows his good side. Well, episode 9 pulls this to another step of her showing trust towards him. So episode 9's an even bigger crux in that aspect.
Just
And,
so that
her
they could
friends are
break her
betraying
heart.
her. Her friends are betraying her. Rand is not. Weird plot twist. But, her deciding to take the fall is still her showing that she wants to have both. That entire plot line about her, needing to balance both those sides.
Agreed.
Uh,
And here's how serious it is, because Brett was actually getting along with Rand in the previous episode when they're on the moon together. But in this episode, he tells Reagan logically that her dad has to be the mole by the fact that he has her hand. Again, the cloned hand comes back because Rand used it to break into Cognito Inc.
yeah, that's true. And so before we kind of move on, Wolf, do you have anything to add
Well,
on to this?
I want to point out, right? I love that. I at first disliked that Reagan stuck up for Rand and said, "Hey, I'm going to choose my father over the team," right? But then, as I kind of sat back and thought about it more, I actually started to enjoy it more because, again, it shows just how she's still stuck in that toxic relationship with him, and she hasn't fully figured out at that point, and it makes a lot more sense because she hadn't fully figured out just how bad Rand is for her too, right? She wants to see the good in him, and she believes there is good in him, and maybe there is, but you know, she fully believes there is, whether there is or not, and other people can see that there definitely isn't, or that it's very minimal if so. I love that she does stick up for him, and I
The other
hope.
thing
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, you
Oh,
go.
go ahead. I'm more or less finished. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say the other thing is Reagan does consider the possibility that maybe her dad is the mole, but then she says, "But the thing is, whoever the mole is, he framed my team, and my dad doesn't care enough about you guys to do that." And Rand says, "She's right. I don't even know any of your names."
Yeah,
So she ended up being right in that regard. Is that the thing is, it's one thing if Rand had been the mole, and she probably would have let him drown if he had been that person, or get eaten by sharks that do Krav Maga, as it were. She realized he can't be the mole because he doesn't care enough to betray people that are her coworkers.
Yeah, it's
They
not
are
that she
cool.
has a sudden decision that, oh, my dad's all good.
Yeah.
She knows he's shit, but she knows, or she thinks she knows, the ways in which he is and isn't shit.
yeah.
Fair. Very fair.
Because I again, connecting from the episode before this, where they kind of see she kind of sees more, she sees through the madness in a sense, and he does make some good points. So I think that's kind of, they're counting on the fact that you're carrying on from that bit, which I could buy, but maybe it needed a bit more. But again, like Haddock said, her turning herself in as the mole shows that she kind of wants to still have both. She's not giving up on the team entirely to be Rand's daughter, just like she's not gonna turn in Rand in order to protect the team. She wants it in the middle, as it is.
Right.
So
Which is fair. I'll also mention, I enjoyed we've not talked about it too much, but I do kind of enjoy JR's character and just the I guess you'd say the blatantly evil that he is, and I just enjoy that. Yeah, and I just
By the way,
enjoy his
of
back and
course,
forth with
Oprah
Oprah. Yeah,
loves the Illuminati.
or or
Just
trying
wanted
to
to
get
say.
into, and then trying to get in with the shadow board too. Yeah, that was very good.
And Gigi wants to work for Oprah. Like, one of the secrets revealed is she's been sending job applications to the Illuminati for months. And she says bluntly
Yeah.
it's because she likes Oprah better as a potential boss than JR.
Which, by the way, jumping a bit for this, in the end, it turns out that after the entire climax happens and Reagan is about to start the job, apparently apparently JR is now a criminal and is put away, and I kind of want to know more about that. I want to know what
Yeah.
exactly caused that change, because
Oh,
it's
you
kind.
mention it. They found out he was embezzling from the company, which is a running gag
Yeah.
throughout the season. Like, he
Yeah,
orders
that's
them to liquidate.
true. Yeah,
I
that's
like
true, but
that
I
they
also
did
think
this.
like they do mention it, like as soon as Reagan walks into the office at the very last few minutes of the season, that hey, so JL kind of went against our protocols and stuff, so he's out. We want
out
to,
of prison.
and yeah, so he's in prison. We see what he's exactly doing, and so I kind of want to see more, from that side of things. Like, what is the relation between JR and the Shadow People? Just to if we can see a bit more of that. That's something I would like to see in season 2. Not necessarily here, but
I
and
think
then.
so too.
Mhm. And so going back to the finale, then we get to part 2, where again another line I like, where again goes, let's do one thing that no psychiatrist ever managed to do: go inside my head.
Yep.
And we literally go inside Reagan's head, and oh boy indeed.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, it gets really trippy.
I want to say trippy, but also, again, considering everything we said about Rand, deleting memories of a friend you had, that is seriously fucked up. Like, this is. I don't think I've said. Maybe if I did something like this before, I can't recall at the moment, but I don't think I've ever seen something this fucked up in any kind of show or movie. And again, Rand is such a motherfucker, but at the same time, this is an ingeniously fucked up plot that I like. I like this guy as a villain, quote unquote.
Yeah, you can't like him as a father, but you can like him in terms of his entertainment value. And especially, and I think what really makes it that is the way, because the whole reason they have to go into Reagan's mind is that she has failsafe, and she asks, "Don't you have the password to shut him down?" And Rand says, "I always let you set the passwords because you seem more responsible between the two of us." And I just face her. I'm like, "Do you not have Google passwords? That you should have Google passwords for the bear, so you can have an autocomplete fill it in."
But she's 30, so this would have been when she was 8, so they would not have had Google passwords at her age.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's actually true.
So, but in any case, they go into her mind to find out what Barrow's password is, and Reagan asks Brett to play guard duty, and he's worried that she's mad at him for accusing her father, but Reagan's like, "Of course I'm not mad. My dad was being suspicious, but we need someone to protect us while we're doing this." But of course, Brett fucks it up, because he slips on some memory goo and ends up in the vat too, as well as in Ray's mind.
But I like that we mentioned the prom scene before, but just a side note, because we talked about him going into her brain and stuff. When they go back to the present after this entire thing is done, Reagan actually remembers that, and she thanks him for it. And I thought it was a really nice dynamic between the two. Again, they're good besties. I love them as besties.
They are. I also like that Brett apologizes because he says he knows it went against her orders and he tampered with her memories. Considering what Reagan just found out, she's like, at least I
Yeah.
had someone on my team when I was a kid, and thank you for
Mhm.
that. And
So speaking of that, just
but
Haddock, as someone who really likes Rand, what did you think about this plot twist?
All right, so you and I have definitely talked about this before, so you know what my thoughts are. I think that it was very well set up, and especially when you watch it a second time, there was
Mm.
more that I appreciated, especially
Yeah.
since, it's not just episode 8 that Rand and Reagan have a little bit better chemistry. It's also episode 9 where he's cleaning the house for her promotion and so forth. But um even though it was well set up for me, it wasn't an emotional shocker for me because first of all, there's a limited amount of time that you get on a Netflix season when they're only giving you 10 episodes. Another is that I feel like Rand was never established as a character who had boundaries. So
Yeah.
Rand was a character we always saw who was undermining Reagan, and even though we saw that he would do some of these things on quote unquote out of her affection, even in episode 8, his high point, he said things like, I tweaked your DNA in the womb. Like, we knew that he had no stops. So this is not
Yeah.
something that was an emotional shocker plot twist for me as an audience member, but where it clicked home is how well it is for a moment between Reagan and Rand. This is a game changer for the two of them because
Yeah.
she
yeah,
I
was not
it's
expecting him to have
interesting.
done that. And that's where I think
agree.
that was good. So it's not a
I
shocker
mean,
for me because I'm like, oh duh, of course Rand did that. Duh. But it's
Mhm.
gonna be good for seeing what's gonna happen moving forward since we know this is gonna change their relationship.
Yep.
yeah, I
Agreed.
think it just speaks to the tragedy of the situation in that Rand just does not understand people, and I think it's actually something they need to address because first, when Reagan and Rand go through their minds, they see that she seems to have a very lonely childhood, that she scared away the only kid who came to her birthday party because she made a scale velociraptor because and that's actually an interesting thing because it's that there's some sort of discrepancy because that I realized in hindsight because Reagan said she didn't know any 80s pop culture because her dad tossed out the television when she was a kid, but she knows 90s pop culture. She knows Jurassic Park, and she said Barrow said she wanted to marry NSYNC when she was 8 and become a Lego astronaut. And Reagan
Mhm.
doesn't dispute this. So, and as a
Yeah.
brick joke in the cameo later on, but then she notices glitches in the memories. She sees Oren, the kid who was scared by a velociraptor, actually riding it with her. And when she wins the science fair, he comes up to her and congratulates her. And Reagan gets suspicious as Rand drags her away. And finally, after a point, she kind of goes, fuck it, and goes into these blacked out Polaroids. Her memories are portrayed as photos all strung together on a corkboard, and she notices some are blacked out. So she goes into one and she gets a huge shocker. Like, and you can her school principal is saying Reagan's smart and she could certainly go to fourth grade, but I don't recommend it because she would be separated from her friend Oren. And the principal is actually quite reasonable. He says Reagan needs social skills to function in the world, and Oren's been a good influence on her. And while this is
Yeah.
going on,
And sorry, go ahead. I just wanted
and
to.
And here's the thing Tamiko actually seems to consider this seriously. She and Rand were together at the time, but Rand has a disgusted expression during this. And Reagan is, and you know what's going to happen next is going to be horrible. But she decides to go forward anyway. And that's
Mhm.
when she gets to the episode, to the moment where Rand hooked her up to a machine, had Barrow sedate her, and erased Oren from all bits of her mind, which meant
Which,
she
when
forgot
she
to attend
finds
her
it out,
birthday party.
yeah,
I think
and
it's
like
not a shocker in terms of brand, but
I
when you
wouldn't
realize how
necessarily.
barely expected it was in,
Yeah, I'll say this that no matter if you see this as a shocking plot twist, or like Haddock said that that it's more what kind of fucked up relation there's between Reagan and her father. Just the point where you discover this with her, and to her this is devastating.
it
This is like
is.
the last thing she would imagine happening, even though she knows her father is a shithead. She couldn't imagine that he would go that far. And I think that's also kind of what we think, especially after the Buzz Aldrin episode, that Rand might be awful, but he's not that awful.
Yes.
He's not that
I thought he
psychotic
was
and
that awful.
Mm.
There's some lines
okay.
he won't cross, like he won't leave Reagan with an ostensible murderer. But then here's the line that really cements it: is when he erases Lauren from her mind, he says, "You're gonna win a Nobel Prize at 13. You're gonna go back to you're gonna work for Cognito Inc. and serve as insurance for me because JR is probably gonna get me fired." And it's like that's when it sinks in. This was never for Reagan's benefit at all. None of his actions were. It was always for him. And it puts all of his decent moments into a new light. Did he ever, or did any of it mean anything? Something Reagan also questions when she comes out. And because she's like, you never actually cared about me. You were only using me as your pawn to get back into Cognito Inc.
And at the same time,
then-
we're seeing this the entire series. Rand specifically talks about her wanting her to go where he hasn't. Like, this is like it recontextualizes it a little bit, but we've seen it so clearly the entire series.
Yeah,
That this is his
it's
motivation.
more that it was there,
It's like
but now it's in a whole new light.
Right, because when you realize you got the whole piece and you're like, oh my god, you are a terrible father. Because you were hoping those little bits of redemption. I mean, and that's ways it's similar to Bojack. Without spoilers, Bojack is someone who you always think, well, he's awful, but you bond with him. And then inevitably he fucks it up. And so, and I guess I should have seen this coming from a Netflix adult cartoon, even if it's a different crew, but it was still a shock. In the sense that when you start registering how this damaged Reagan irrevocably, and how she's had to deal with the
I don't want to take up too much space. I want to make sure that Wolf gets some comments in
Oh,
here
you're
since
fine.
we're
I
going
love
on
listening to other
But
people
I
talk.
want-
Makes my job so much easier.
Okay, good. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not hogging it. But I want to
Go for
talk
it.
about the foreshadowing with Project Jellybean. And did you guys notice this? Because I want to
Yeah.
bring this out
Actually,
specifically
yeah,
with
on
the
the
second
second
watch.
point, yes.
Because if you noticed, Rand goes in before they do the whole mind dive, they find the equipment and he points to a photograph of how he used quote unquote Project Jellybean with the president Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Hint, hint,
Wh-
hint.
Yeah.
And then when we actually go
Which,
to the
by
scene,
the way,
we look back-
I like how that's actually an in-joke within the show. That's actually the reason she's named Reagan.
Yep.
Canonically, it's not
And
just a
so
joke.
that
by the
was
writers.
that was the biggest part of the foreshadowing. And so when you get to the actual memory, if you notice, it's Project Jellybean. It's the same equipment, and he's going there talking to Reagan, saying, "Hey there, Jellybean." And you notice all those things a second time, all the clearer about how much they were foreshadowing all of this.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Uh,
But I'm actually
and-
editing an article that needs to improve the STEM because Reagan's also the name of the character that overthrows her father in King Lear. And so Rand ought to have seen coming, if he knew anything about arts and classic literature, that Reagan would turn on him eventually on realizing he's terrible and controlling. And it's especially highlighted when she calls him out for what he did, and he said, "Friends hold you back." And it strikes your mind, this guy is terrible. There's nothing redeeming about him because he just doesn't get it. And so, and especially highlights that Reagan says, "Barrow, you don't kill him because I want to kill him."
I don't think
Yeah.
that he's a villain for part 2. I think he's going to be an antagonist, but I don't think it's going to be that they're not just going to make it a straight cutoff. Now he's the bad guy, period, for this show. They're still going
No,
to keep it complicated.
they have something planned for it, but
Absolutely.
so kind of jumping into this because we basically talked about everything else. So we have this tease at the end, which Wolf probably heard me talking about a lot in the last few episodes of this. I really hate those cliffhanger endings nowadays that like every first season needs to end with like a tease of what's to come in season 2. But well, it is kind of annoying in the way it ends. Not necessarily that Rand is now the boss or anything, but just that you had such a good moment. Imagine if the Rand thing would have been kept for a season 2 opening, that we would just end this with Reagan officially becoming the boss, like sitting on the chair and being like, "Okay, I'm the head now. and then just Rand taking over would be the start of season 2. Wouldn't that work for you guys? What do you say?
I love the hook. I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's a stereotype for Netflix to do cliffhangers, but I love it so much. I just love how they trash it out at the last minute. I love the hook because I love the concept of him being the boss. And I love that they gave us that tiny little tidbit so that there's something really exciting for me to look forward to season 2. Because
Yeah.
without it, I wouldn't have had something to look forward to for season 2 as much.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think
Okay.
for this instance, it works a lot because now you're left with a lot of questions in regards to how is she going to deal with Rand? How is Rand going to deal with her friends, her coworkers? Is Rand going to do what he's done in the past once more again with, like, say, Brad or the rest of her coworkers? In him seeing that they're holding her back once again, especially
Right.
Brad.
Or is he going to fire Reagan? Or is
Hmm.
Reagan going to quit and maybe as a brick joke seek employment at the Illuminati?
And it
And
also
Rand
Which brings
it
which brings
also
the fact that when I say ending it without a cliffhanger hook, again, it's kind of a minor thing.
Mhm.
It's just a personal peeve at this point. But also, if you have to do it, at least do it like this. Well, the first season already gave me something to lash onto. I at least had fun with what I had. It doesn't feel like I'm just at the start of something and I need to wait to see how it keeps going because what I had before this is satisfying. So I'll forgive it here for also being a good hook and also for actually being a show before the cliffhanger. So
yeah,
I
also
at
how
least
it was
forgive that.
mhm. yeah,
because also that it was built up that Rand got all those shares in episode 2 and they finally come back in episode 10, or the running gag of JR embezzling. It finally comes back to bite him when it
Yeah.
turns out the Shadow Council knew all along, but they were waiting for an excuse to get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
And fun fact, so remember we mentioned Andre's sobriety in episode 5 and how that seemed at odds with what happened later? In the season finale, under Truth or Immediate, he's not really a doctor. He actually flunked out of medical school. Something my brother is
Right.
an ophthalmologist. He says that's really hard to do,
Hmm.
which I'll take his word for it. But apparently,
Okay.
but it makes sense in hindsight. So he's not a real doctor, and he's the one who did Glenn's surgery to turn him into a dolphin person. Something that Glenn calls him out for. Say, you said, trust me, I'm a doctor. And Andrew says, that's just something you say.
Well,
But it's
as long as you
another
don't have
thing that
anything to
explains,
prove it, yeah.
but it explains a lot, like why he messed up the face-off surgery. And realizing, yeah, doctors with OCD, that would probably not happen, especially if you can only function while high. Like, if you try to do medical work while sloshed or high,
I'd
you're
say that
probably going to get fired and blacklisted.
if a doctor told me that he's slashed or high before he was gonna pull an operation on me, I just better operate on myself at this point. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. And I feel like Shadow Prison's gonna come up in season 2
Yeah,
because it was
because
mentioned so many times in the season finale.
yeah,
Yeah.
there are definitely things to explore. From Rand being the CEO of the company to that shadow prison they bring up, and also and if is Reagan even gonna get the company back? What is going on with JR? There are stuff to look forward to, and in terms of stuff I would want to see, I don't really have any specific prediction or wants or needs for season 2. I just want to see where the story goes at this point.
I'm in regards to that. I'm curious to ask the question, to the people here. Looking at season 2 and looking at what you've got thus far, would you want to see a redemption for Rand?
At this point, I think it's too late. And also, considering what
Yeah.
type of character he is, I just really want him to embrace the madness at this point. Because, like I said, I don't think he's really a character that needs to be redeemed at this point. They tricked us once. I don't want this again.
Oh, I think that this show is a lot about balance. and it's a lot about trauma and how to deal with it. So I think that they're going to continue to keep Rand as a complex character, and so I think that the solution is also going to be similarly complex, where there's going to be peace. He's not going to magically become like
Yeah.
an angel or something, but I think there's still a lot more that's going to happen as far as him admitting his areas of wrong and at least him and Reagan becoming at peace with one another. I don't think the show is going to end with them hating each other and at odds. So if you want to call that a redemption arc, then I think that's where they're going to be headed. They're not going to end
Actually,
with them being like "fuck you" at the end.
That's fair.
one thing I actually want to point out that like a friend was just talking to me about this really old forgotten game called Kaya Dark Lineage, where the main character finds out in the end at the end that her father was the main bad guy, and he's also the final boss. And the fight ends with the father kind of falling into a pit of lava, and the main character, his daughter, just looks at the lava, takes his helmet, and throws it into the lava. And she's not even crying. She's not thinking about it. She's just like completely hateful towards him. And I was like, you know what? If something like this happens, that like Reagan would see Rand die in some way, not saying they're gonna do it, just if something about this concept comes to fruition, I think this would be a really boss moment for Reagan to just see Rand like die or something and be like, you know what? Good. I don't care. He was my father. Just good. He was awful. Not obviously not saying they're gonna do this, but he just talked to me about it, and I knew we were gonna do this podcast today, and like I started connecting the dots. So wanted to show.
I know for myself personally, there is at least one thing I'd like to see, and that's Rand trying to do away with the moral center that is Brett and how these two will react off of one another with how Reagan feels about Rand now. Will Brett continue to just be the yes man even to Rand when Rand is clearly worse than anything they've dealt with so far, at least in some ways?
That could be really interesting, and also because Rand has a lot of an impact on Reagan's trauma, while Brett seems to have a positive influence on Reagan in terms of sociality. So in a sense, Rand now has to face another Orin, which he can't delete.
Well, he might try.
He'll try, but at the same time, I think it's just like a point where it just became harder for him.
Well, yeah, it's interesting now because Reagan can actually stand up to him now. She can do more herself now, right? Thanks in part to the way he raised her, right? So it'll be interesting to see how they interact off of one another now, especially considering how she feels and everything. I think absolutely there's a lot to look forward here, character-wise, especially in terms of part 2 or season 2, however you wish to call it, and moving forward at that and seeing where they go with it. And I do agree that with Haddock, right, it's going to be interesting to see how complex they make everything and where they end up at, and how people take that as well.
So anything else?
We have gone a solid 2 hours.
I mean, Instinct is still locked in a basement somewhere in Cognito Inc. So
that's true.
It's necessarily going to be left.
Yeah, I guess the only plot point I'm looking forward to is him somewhat being disappointed with the way Friends ended, and now that convinces him to go on another world dominating.
I love that they bribed him with Friends. I love that. Yeah. It's so dumb, but I love it. Friends is a great show.
It's also funny that when Instinct convinces the team when they're trying to evacuate from Barrow by going to Shadow Prison, like it makes sense in context that they have to go back. They realize that Robotus, as the robot president is called, is still in the basement. And he's probably their best chance. So they decide to give him access to robot arms, but they said, you're not allowed the internet because we don't want you to know about furries. And Glenn's like, actually, not everything about furries is sexual, but most of it is.
The fact that
And
Glenn
it's like,
knows about furries was not lost on me.
well, he is half dolphin.
Well, yeah, but these are implications that I don't think I'm ready to discuss just yet. So I guess that's all for this episode of the Outcast. We hope you enjoyed. What are your thoughts about Inside Job? You can tell us all about it in the comment section below, on our Twitter, which is Berkcast with a capital B, capital C, and on our Tumblr, which is Berkcast Team. Haddock, where can the people at home find you?
I am still one of those people who lingers mostly on Tumblr, so I'm King of the Wilder West. King of the, it's spelled like Wilder West, just all together, smashed together. So that's
We'll
where you
probably
can find
have a link in the description, so they'll find it. And Jaya, where can the people at home find you?
You can find me on my blog, priyajshruther.com, and I also post to Medium. I'm probably going to have an Inside Job article up this weekend about the significance of Reagan's name related to Shakespeare. And so I'll put a link for that in the description when it's ready.
Awesome. So with that said, have a fantastic night or day wherever you are, and take care.
Bye-bye.